So whether it's the Ghanaian cedi, the Egyptian pound, the Nigerian naira, or even the American dollar, the money in your wallet is not going as fast and as far as it used to. And why is that? It's because inflation. And inflation has quickly become one of the top news stories of 2022. And it's no wonder more and more consumers are asking what this really means for them. We've all been feeling the impact of rising prices on everything from foodstuff to petrol and energy bills, while the cost of living is still rising. Life is becoming much more expensive. And this is largely due to supply chain disruptions driven by COVID-induced shortages, spikes in demand, rising energy prices, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and fluctuating global prices. So we want to see if we can answer how to inflation-proof your finances today. So let me introduce my guests. We have Victor Aliyu, Senior Vice President and Head Investments Global, Sancora Investments, joining me now. Victor, welcome to the show. We are looking to you to be our expert today, so let's get straight to it. All right, so Victor, with runaway inflation happening all over the world, we're experiencing our money, whether it's in naira, rands, kwacha, shillings, cedi, whatever it is, not going as far as we would like. So really break it down. How does inflation affect my earning power or the value of my salary?
All right. So I'll start by saying that inflation is, pretty much everywhere, if you will, a monetary phenomenon, right? It just basically measures the rate at which prices are rising. So it just also simply means that once inflation starts to rise quite significantly, it reduces your ability to purchase. So for instance, if you could buy maybe 5 units of a particular item, as the price of that item rises significantly, you're then able to buy maybe 4, probably 3. You're basically forced to trade down. So essentially the impact of inflation on your pockets is that it reduces your purchasing power. It reduces your ability to buy as much as you could. And obviously it reduces your own standard of living. It reduces pretty much your well-being and has, very strong implications for the overall economy because what it then does is that people have to reduce what they buy. The overall productive capacity within the economy also then starts to shrink, and it has implications for output growth and all of that. So inflation is, however, desirable at a certain level. It is tolerable at a certain level, but beyond those sort of levels, it then becomes a problem.
So are there monetary tools that we should be looking at right now when it comes to inflation-proofing our finances? Is this the point where we need to tighten our budgets, cut any small extras we may have? In terms of even streaming platforms, there are almost a dozen of those now. Is it time for us to streamline to one? What can we do?
So once your spending power drops, you typically would cut down on spending that is discretionary. So spending that you can obviously do without. Those are things that you would want to cut down on to ensure that you are able to, as much as possible, protect your purchasing power on critical things. So these are certain areas that you can certainly look at in trying to inflation-proof your life, if you will. The truth of the matter is that inflation occurs in different phases and in different cycles. So we're in an inflationary cycle, albeit a type that we haven't seen in about 40 years. I think that it will certainly pass. Whether inflation would then go back to pre-pandemic levels, really remains to be seen.
So one other thing we've noticed is that as prices are rising, wages overall are not increasing for most people. We're also seeing central banks raise the interest rates in order to deal with the rising inflation, and that then has effect on households. So also give us this sort of breakdown in terms of the rising interest rates. How is that affecting households as well?
So, the idea by particularly the US Federal Reserve, for instance, in raising interest rates is to essentially try and cool the economy, right? Once you're able to cool the economy, you then are able to kind of like reduce or drop inflation. Also, it's important to also point out here that particularly in the US, we're seeing wage growth, certainly not on pace with the level of inflation that we're seeing, but wage is certainly growing because if you look at the labor market, it's still pretty much like an employees market.
Yes.
So people are essentially able to get higher wages, but it certainly isn't on pace with the sort of inflation that we're seeing. So Increasing interest rates really is just a monetary tool to try and reduce, economic activity, to try and take some steam out of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing. Because when inflation becomes too high, it has debilitating impacts on the economy. So it's important that you try to reduce that inflation such that growth then, is managed on a more sustainable path. I think that's what the Federal Reserve is doing with, increasing interest rates. But for households, as interest rates increase, what it then does, interest rate essentially is just the cost of money. So as interest rates rise, money just becomes a bit more expensive. If you take a look at the mortgage market in the US, for instance, mortgage rates have doubled year on year, essentially. And that has led to a situation where, people that are looking to buy homes or buy a house, that number has dropped off quite significantly over the last couple of months. So increase in interest rates would typically reduce your spending, reduce consumer spending, would also reduce your ability to spend significantly, and not just for consumers, really, for businesses and across the economy. But it is a tool through which central banks would try to control inflation.
Inflation. All right, Victor. My final question to you is that even though these are tough, challenging times, and people are always questionable about the stock markets, we see a lot of people saying that there is some kind of relief to be found in investing at this point in time. So let me quickly ask you that. Are there stocks that we should be looking at this point in time in order to sort of get us through these periods of high inflation, or to combat the loss of wages or the value of our money that's not going as far as it used to?
Yeah, I think when it comes to investment options, really, largely around fixed income instruments. There are inflation bonds, particularly in the US. These bonds are sort of indexed to inflation. You also have Treasury inflation protected securities. These securities offer returns that are commensurate or slightly higher than inflation. So they essentially sort of protect your investment against the debilitating impact of inflation. And inflation is naturally not great for risk assets. So going into stocks at this time where inflation is really high, where the Federal Reserve is also raising interest rates, doesn't exactly bode well for risk assets at this time.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. I know it's a continued conversation because, as you and our guests have pointed out today, it is right now a global phenomenon that economies around the world are having to deal with, and it will not change overnight. Victor, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be wrapping things up on Business Edge now. Coming to you, Lakan has NC4 to watch.
On NC4 to watch, let's tell you that Kenya is facing the risk of another fuel crisis that could paralyze transport services and inflict more pain on households and businesses weighed down by a high cost of living. The latest fears come amid the government's failure to compensate oil marketing companies for 3 consecutive cycles under the state-funded fuel subsidy program. The Bank of Ghana has indicated it will soon close down licensed forex bureaus that are not compliant with the foreign exchange law. Officials of the central bank said the decision comes after field exercises to check the state of compliance with some bureaus in the metropolis. The Nigerian government says it has completed the takeover of 4 electricity distribution companies and constituted the board of the Nigeria Electricity Liability Management Company. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo said the newly constituted board of the Nigeria Electricity Company would enhance ongoing efforts to resolve the liabilities. And finally, Australian listed Invictus Energy Limited expects to start drilling its first exploration well for oil and gas in the northern part of Zimbabwe in the coming weeks. Exploration drilling of the first well will take 8 weeks, following which another 1.5-kilometer hole will be sunk. And that's all on NC4 to watch. Back to Tolu now to wrap up the show.
Thank you so much, Leka, and thank you to our guests for joining us. We hope you had a good show with us today and you started taking down some ways to recession and inflation-proof your finances. And whether it's in cedis, it's in Egyptian pounds, naira, or dollars, we may be able to find a profitable week after all. Don't forget to find us and follow us on social media at News Central TV. Subscribe to our mobile app. Subscribe there, download it, of course, be with us on YouTube, and you can watch us on the platforms we're available. Until next time, I'm Tolu Lokwe Adileru Balogun. Do have a good week ahead.